I've lived my life on the side of the stage. And the side of the stage is where, one, you get to interact typically with the act, because what you're doing is you're producing the sound that they want, as opposed to producing the sound that the crowd might want. So it's a far more technical role than an artistic role. The guy in the front, guy or girl in the front, is mixing the sound the way they want to hear it. So they're putting, more bass guitar in, or less kick drum, or whatever. So you're getting their, what they want to hear, what they want you to, the band to hear. Sure, the band are still creating the music, but the balance of those is very much driven by the person who's sitting out the front. With the role in the monitor space, you might have, and the most I've done I think is 20 different sends. So you effectively not a left and a right send for all you're doing in front of house, or maybe a left and a right and a send out to the foyer or something, but 20 different mixes, all for individual performers on the stage who go, oh, I want a bit of kick drum, no, I need hats, or I need to hear my own voice, and I don't want to hear them, please don't put them in whatever I'm producing. And that could be going to a wedge on the floor, so a speaker, or it could be a set of headphones that they've got with a wireless pack. But nevertheless, it's customed to what they want, and very much they'll tell you if they're not getting what they want, and that could be during sound check, and really in Monitor's land most of the work is done during a sound check. Although during the show, if you get looked at and pointed at an instrument and pointer up or down, you'll soon work out what they want. But Monitor's land is normally where it's at. You can see in this photo here, large mixing console. That was the first digital console I ever had anything to do with, a Yamaha PM5D. Wow. It's probably 15 years or so old now. I remember going over to the Yamaha dealer in Melbourne to have a look at this brand new console that had just came out, and they were $100,000. Fully digital, plug your computer in, recall scenes, do all sorts of things with them. The second-hand market, you'll find those for about $5,000 today. It's interesting to see how that whole drop off of value. Having said that, would I still use one today? Every other day. I know it well. Produces excellent sound. It's rock solid. I've never ever had one fail on me. I would have mixed, hundreds of gigs on a PM5D. Would choose it every day. Would I buy one today? No. Much better value for money that you get these days, but nevertheless a rock solid console. But Monitors is where it's at. It's where everything comes back to. You'll notice in the picture here there's a whole bunch of cables and things here. Cross patch, so microphones that are coming in from the stage, and then we patch them out to the consoles wherever they need to go. So these big connectors here, 56-way balanced audio. One of those will go into the back of my Monitor's console there. One of those off to the guy out the back who's doing the vision. The vision, so they typically would take a split of all the audio, and the other one going to the front of house console. So we each get our own connection to that microphone, and so I do my mix, set my head amp gains, do all the things that I need to do. The guy at broadcast does the same thing, the guy at front of house does the same thing, so we're quite independent of each other than we're all using the one microphone to pick up, whether it's the singer or the guitarist or the bass or anything. And this is where radio starts to come into what we do. So in that picture there is some radio mics and some transmitters for it, so the IFBs or the packs. And in terms of Monitors where it's at, it's typically where amps for both front of house and anything I've got on stage is. So it's usually a busy little spot. We're looking after the act. We've got microphones that we're feeding to them when they go on and come off. It's typically a busy spot. A lot of the photos I'll show tonight certainly feature my favourite PM5D. And when you look up close, it does look probably 20 years old. You know, the little displays are 7-segment LED things that you'd expect to see of the time, but these days nice little LCDs with colour backs that provide the same sort of function. This one was taken at the Odeon. I spent a number of years doing night mass for Dark Mofo, so that's the sort of 9 PM till 4 AM shift at Dark Mofo, with everything from German heavy metal bands to no, we won't talk about that one.
No, don't talk about that.
Justin knows that story. The weirdest one was, and this was a photo of 3 very large weather balloons that were blown up with blower vacs till they burst. That was the art for the night. And when they blew up, they were sealing to floor. And I'm sitting on the side of the stage there, and I was pressed against the wall because the balloon had just consumed the desk and kept going. To just weird. To a silent film we had one night where there was a person providing percussion as the soundtrack to the silent film, and all the commotion that happened in the audience that I didn't actually work out till after was someone had brought their blind friend along to see the silent film. And those of you who have ever seen anything about silent films, all the words are written. So because said blind friend couldn't read the words, our friend was relaying the words vocally to them, and everyone else appeared to have come to see a silent film. So we're less than impressed with having the words read out to them. But
running commentary.
A running commentary on a silent film. But it was Witches in the Middle Ages was the silent film made in the 1920s. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Sorry, Bill.
Yeah.
The desk, is it layered? Is it how many layers on the actual base?
On this particular console, there are 24 channels in 2 layers, so it's a 48 channel audio console with some 4 stereo channels as well.
Nice.
off to the side. So yeah, most consoles have got the concept of layers. So the one fader, flying faders, i.e. a little motor that drives it up and down, and depending on where you press the button, depending on what that particular fader is doing at any particular time.
We used to work on Moto R96. Little puppet desk.
Yeah, little baby of those. I've got a number of Yamaha desks, so I'm a bit of a Yamaha fan.
The A01V.
The A01V, you've used my A01V, Tricky, on many occasions. Another sort of photo, again, radio mics beside us, but it really becomes the sort of the hub of where the performers are at, and you're dealing with them one-to-one, so it doesn't matter who you're dealing with necessarily in terms of an act. You tend, whether it's someone famous or not, you tend to have a relationship with them in terms of what they want in their ears or in their wedge. You can't see that one particularly well. Much more modern desk. A lot of them have got touch screens these days. So rather than just with knobs and sliders, there's a lot of interaction with touch screens and little LCD panels. The orange, pink and green and things have all got words written in them. No, I won't go there. So that's my early days in terms of gig, if you like. Probably about 12 years ago I discovered theatre, or theatre discovered me, I think probably was a better way to put it. You're an audio guy, do you reckon you can come and do our show for us because the other audio guy can't, or the other audio guy just turned the microphones up at the start of the show and then left them on, and we were out back changing costumes, and we didn't really like the fact that you could hear us at the toilet, or all that sort of thing. So theatre found me in many ways, and I went, this is a place I could enjoy. Instead of going along, doing the gig once, turning up at 8 AM, taking everything out of the truck, setting it up, sound checking, doing the show, packing it all back in the truck and getting home at sort of 3 AM. This idea of having a few days to get the gear into the theatre, and then spending a bit of time running the show, and then night after night after night doing the show, seemed to have some appeal. So I've been very lucky in terms of what I've been able to do there, and worked in a lot of those theatres in Hobart that you've all seen and driven past, and some of you have probably been in there and seen shows, Theatre Royal, Playhouse Theatre, the Peacock Theatre, Mount Nelson Theatre, the theatres out at Rest Point, the stadium, so MyState Bank, sorry, what was it called, the deck. Though all had opportunities to do things in all of those. In theatre, I've had to break that rule, and I'm no longer beside the stage. I now actually have got to come out in the auditorium with the audience. But I think once the lights go down, because it's typically not a rock concert, it's something that you can hide behind your mixing console with your script, and away you go. I've really found that that's a place that I enjoy being and doing what I do. So this is a picture in the Playhouse. Another photo sort of looking forward. This was one of the Old Nick Summer School, Be More Chill. I don't know, two years ago I think now.
How old's the console?
That console is relatively new. That's one I own. It's another Yamaha QL5. It's a 80-channel console, smaller footprint than the other one. So layers again, two layers of 32 inputs for mono inputs and another 8 stereo inputs, 16 mix buses, 16 DCAs. Oh, wow. So a really compact console, and you can see there it's probably about this sort of dimension. But we've really moved away from the digital console being just an analog converter to now starting to think about, well, you know, for example, in this console, I run it on an IP network. You know, it runs a protocol called Dante, and okay, in this case, my radio mics were right beside me here, but I had a band down in the pit there, so a piece of Cat5 down to the band and a stage box down there, and the A to D function is done in the stage box down underneath the stage, and all my mics from my band plug in down there, and that's certainly, and as we progress through tonight, that's certainly where it's at in terms of whether you're working in theatre like this, where you're working in broadcast. There's not much that's not carried on an IP packet today. It is the universal, pretty much the universal way of shifting stuff around. See a couple of laptops there. Invariably, shows want sound effects. Some of them more so than others. So invariably, as a sound designer, which is what the function in theatre is, the director will say, well, you can read in the script, it says I need an explosion, or I need a bell ringing, or I need a phone or something or other. Just go and sort it out. So the skill of a sound designer is not only about working out who's on stage and what mics need to be up at any one time, and that takes its time to plot a show and do it, but also what sound effects you need, where they fit into the show, etc. And I've been lucky enough over the last 3 years to be nominated for a Best Sound Design in Theatre in Tasmania. Having won one, the professional from the mainland always wins that award, and so he should, because that's what he does, and he's very good at it. But I really enjoy the fact that I can do it, and I'm quite flattered the fact that they think that I do okay with it, because for me it's not my day job, it's something that I do because I like doing. And whether it's in the Playhouse, this one's in the Theatre Royal. I was fortunate enough to do Les Mis there, the beginning of 2021, I think that's right, yep. And that's certainly and those of you who know Les Mis will know it's a long show. It's probably the favourite one I've done over the time. And same, get to work with the kids. My daughter was young Cosette in the show, so I've really found that being involved in theatre, and I do have 2 kids that musical theatre is their thing. My son, who's nearly 21, is just finishing a musical theatre a diploma in Melbourne at a musical theatre school. My 12-year-old, all she wants to do is be more like him. So I'm sure that she will end up, if you ask her what she's doing, she's going to be going to Patrick School of the Arts in Melbourne and doing what her brother did. But it's great to be able to spend time, because particularly with the theatre show, you're in there for a long time. You bump into the theatre, you have production week, which is getting the gear in there, and then dress running and tech running the show. And so you're there with your kids. They come to the theatre with you. They leave with the theatre with you. So I've found that to be fantastic. This was Shrek. I did at the beginning of the year. Again, another show. I think the ugly duckling just there is my daughter. She was wearing an ugly duckling's costume. Okay, it wasn't. I'm not saying. My son went to Turuna High, and I've been and done their shows a number of times now too. So that's down in the Turuna High gym. But this is where radio's at for me. Where does my knowledge of radio meet my audio space? We're managing the show that I did for Old Nick this year was 33 radio mics. Wow. So you think about the RF management of that. Now, I own 16 of those. There's you see that I've got them in. Where's my mouse gone? There it is. There, packs. Eight radios to a box with a couple of antenna combiners. So there's over my 32 channels, I've got 2 paddles combined to mean that we're not got lots of RF cable all over the place. But you do have to have your wits about you. The Sennheiser and Shure are the two sort of brands that are used, and they make a sort of consumer range. That's the range that we use because that's what I can afford. I've got some photos later on of what we use in broadcast. It's still the same manufacturers, but the price, put another zero on the end of it, is pretty accurate. But all those manufacturers have this concept of knowing that, as we know in RF, intermodulation's a thing, a real thing. And when you've got 30 odd channels all trying to transmit at the same time, all with low power, we're talking 50 milliwatts. You need to ensure that there's some thought being put into managing that. So they all have a nice, cool scan feature. You hit the scan button, and they budge their channels into groups, so that you can say, okay, if I take all the channels out of bank 1, we know that they're guaranteed to be intermodulation free, and therefore I rarely get a problem. And the scan function will go away and listen to see if there's any interference on any of those channels and say, okay, bank 1's got 32 channels in it, but only 28 of them are available to you today because I've listened to it, and 4 of them are above what I would call the threshold of interference. So it helps sort of managing in that small space. So you've got that end of it, that's the receive end of it. You've then got the transmitter end of it. So every performer has a little pack on their back, and this was, what was that? That was probably 40 Panto, I think. So a transmitter on their back and a headset that sort of goes over round their ears and plugs into the transmitter. So for the low end stuff that I use, you're looking at probably $1,600 or $1,700 a system. Even the headset's $300. Just the little capsule mic. So it's a significant investment. And what happens is the cables let them break because they're all screwed into the things, and they let their pack swing on the end of their cable, and sure enough, it breaks the cable. So it becomes a challenge to keep always carrying spare mics. I can see Tricky nodding because he's been here and felt the pain.
Also been there, done that.
So one of the gigs I've done quite regularly has been the Ronald McDonald House Charity Ball, and about 6 years ago I was at the ball. I was the monitors guy, the front of house guy, and then there was a vision guy. He came in and provided the big screens, and there was always content for people to play back on the night. And he said to me, "Are you interested in working at the cricket?" I said, "Maybe, tell me more." He said, "Well, the guy that I've got who was looking after audio for me at the cricket has become ill and can't do it anymore. Why don't you come over for a look?" So came over, and the photo there is taken from the control box at Blundstone Arena. So ever since then, any of the major sporting matches that have been there, I've worked with Andrew to produce the in-ground audio, and we look after the big screen. So there are a couple of big screens over there, those of you who've been to watch cricket or footy there. So we put all the content that goes up there comes from us, and anything that you hear through the speakers is coming through the audio desk that I've got, and I'm sitting in
So Andrew,
in the corner.
you for crappy audio
No, you cannot blame me, because
because it's shit.
the ground need to spend about $1 million to replace the speakers, because they are in very poor state. I walked it 2 years ago, and every second one's got a blown high frequency driver. It's woeful.
There's so much echo from the other speakers around the ground.
Yep. And that's a function of a stadium as well, but you're right.
I accept that part, but
Not enough money in the first place to get the power capability. They
Correct.
overdrive it like crazy.
So that's exactly what happened. But they've just replaced the screens, and the next project is replace the speakers. So that will
they're still not 100% right either. They're much better.
the screens.
Yes.
Yeah. Agreed. But again, we are the content deliverers. We're not the ground infrastructure is not ours. We simply deliver.
I'm only having you go.
No. It's a fair call, but we do what we can. Highly produced. So you go to a big bash match and you watch 20 overs either way. But we've spent probably the previous 5 hours of the game. We've rehearsed things that happened on the ground before the game, and at the innings break, we'll have a running sheet which will have 200 or 300 items on it. This commercial, that voiceover, all those sorts of things. So the first ball is bowled and you relax, because most of the work that you've had to do is been in the sort of 2 hours since the gates open. Anyway, that's our control box, and whether we're doing cricket, that's my view of the world. That metal bar there is really, really annoying, but it's where I am, so I get a choice. That crappy music that you hear when you go to the cricket is played by the DJ who sits out on the deck there. I don't
Just push him off.
Well, you could.
Incidentally.
His content's provided by Cricket Australia, so he has a song list to choose from. He doesn't get to pick what he wants to do. But again, you still get to work with your kids. So if my son's not on a camera,
cool,
as he is there, he's been my audio assist on the ground, looking after radio mic batteries and looking after the hosts that work on the ground. So I've been fortunate to be able to do stuff and involve my kids in, or them involving me perhaps in what we're doing. Not just cricket but footy. Again, there's the picture of the control room, and North Melbourne have 4 games a season there, so we get to do that. My son gets to run the scoreboard for me. So again, doesn't matter what we're doing, we get an opportunity to work together. We get to work at other venues. This is North Hobart Oval, much smaller scale there. I was going to say, but be careful what I say about the speakers, because they actually can understand those, but they are 100 volt line as opposed to some, as installed by our mutual friend Tricky.
Jeez.
So yeah, enjoyed, and that's been women's. That was an AFLW game, there earlier in the year. The Big Bash goes to Launceston, so this is the control room in Launceston. We're on the side of the ground there as opposed to the end. For some reason, and I still to this day don't know why, we produced the content for the Big Bash game in Alice Springs. The Hobart Hurricanes sold a game to Alice Springs, so we all went up there and we did all the content up there, and 48 degrees was the hottest I think I've ever been.
You were sold down the line as well.
Yeah, so
It's part of the deal.
part of the deal, yep. But
Bit of a sweetener.
bit of a sweetener. That's right. It was the hottest time I've ever experienced. So that was our control room in Alice. the World game. We did a soccer match. Was an A-League match. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago now. Played on Blundstone Arena. Doesn't really work with a pitch like that on an oval, because the crowd I had to push the ground over this way so that they could have the crowd in the ponting stand. So that's been really a really interesting sort of sideline, if you like, to theatre and gigs that I've done. At about the same time, the guy that I worked for at the ground also gave my name to a outside broadcast company who produced the content for TV, whether that be Stream, for KO, for Fox, for any of the networks. And they were at the time doing the women's Big Bash competition. So they said, we're looking for an audio director. Are you interested? It saves them money. They don't have to fly people in from interstate. I said, sure. Don't know what to do on broadcast, but a bunch of microphones, produce some content. How hard can it be? No.
I spent my life in TV.
I know, absolutely.
I've seen the broadcast stuff that we did compared to the broadcast stuff that the commercials did, and they go at it 10 times harder.
Yes.
And you've probably got a crew to assist you this time, though.
In what I did, I was the audio director, I was the audio technician, I was
The lackey.
the lackey, very much. And as you see, we'll go through, that's not always the case. So you're right in terms of the high-end commercial stuff is quite different to that. But these were done on flyaway kits, so you can see these photos are taken. We were set up the gear on a bunch of plastic blow moulded tables in the basement of the boon stand at Blundstone Arena. We run a bunch of cables out to the cameras, and I'm sitting there with a mixing console, taking the audio off the SDI that comes back from the cameras and putting it in a mixing console, producing an audio mix, which includes effects mics around the ground, and a commentary team sitting up in the commentary box and providing an overall mix for those. You can see a bunch of different pieces of kit around there. This company was very much doing it on a shoestring, so literally a delivery van turned up with a bunch of boxes, and we said, there you go, stick it, connect it together, you'll be right. This thing here, a live view, so our path out of the ground is, albeit a high bandwidth connection, but a connection out over the 4G network to get the content to downstream where all the graphics and things are put on. So we were just producing the clean feed. But taught me a lot about what broadcast's all about. Particularly from an audio going. I know it was where you were, Rod. It's quite different to live audio. Where you need to have your level is quite different to live audio. So it's fair to say that there was a few games in before I went, yeah, okay, I think I'm starting to get what this is about, as opposed to being in a theatre, being in a large venue, and dealing with it in that sort of way.
You need to spin back a bit, Andrew.
Yep.
You just said 4G. You're talking about a public
Yep.
4G network.
I absolutely am.
And when you said high bandwidth, higher than...
But, so
So what are you sending?
megabits, so maybe 20 megabits of content.
They find a few channels to
Multi-channel.
Yeah, they've got a clever aggregation bonding thing, and it's highly buffered. So the content going to air, and air is an interesting concept because it's often streamed, not actually broadcast, might be 30, 45 seconds behind what we've produced. So while it might leave us in near real time, by the time it gets to the other end, gets graphicked, all the rest of it.
We used to do the same thing in radio, so it'd do nothing for it to be a few seconds between the audio that you send and when it arrives at the station to be broadcast live.
Yeah.
It was always a couple of seconds behind.
Yeah. So it's interesting that and that was considered normal, but it meant that you would put a wide shot up and say to upstream, can you put the batting card over that, the top of that, with no confidence that that's what they'd done, because you had no way of checking to see whether that. You've just got to go. It's left us. We're hoping that they do what we've asked them to do. So yeah, when as Tricky says, it's a bunch of 4G bonded together. We'll get to what slightly better than that looks like in a minute, but. So yeah, flyaway kits. You can see there a bunch of different bits and pieces. So this is the vision director. So he's got a bunch of cameras coming into this touch screen here. So he's working out which camera angle he wants to use. He can talk to these camos to ask them to follow this player or do whatever he needs to do. He can talk to the commentary team on our internal comms to say, hey, I've got a replay package coming up of the wickets. You might like to commentate over the top of them. So he's recording every camera all the time and can go back and do a replay on a per camera basis, or do a new cut of that camera, then that camera, that camera. In terms of what I'm setting to him for audio, I've got effects and commentary. So my commentary and effects go together for my live mix, but my effects only get recorded on each of the camera angles. So when we do a highlights package, the commentary team can re-commentate over the highlights package, but with the bat on ball sound. It's amazing what you can do with a shotgun mic, and even though you might be on the camera deck, you still hear what the players say. And the number of times the commentary team will go, gee, did you hear that on the stump mic? Stump mic, the mic was 60, 100 metres away from it. What became obvious though was we were the little boys, because this photo shows the other company, NEP, and their large truck, Pantech, slide out sides, all the rest of it. And here we are in the garage on a bunch of plastic blow mower tables next to it.
Yeah, but NEP got more money.
Oh yes, money to take over everybody. But I work for NEP as well, so that it's what Rod was saying before. That's where the money's at, and that's where the crew is at. So Blundstone hasn't been the only place that we've done that. This is a lovely little ground in Camberwell in Victoria. Still a flyaway kit underneath the old grandstand. There's the commentary box.
Excellent. Where's the big yellow one?
There's the camera tower.
Oh, well, instant scaffold.
Instant scaffold.
Yeah, don't wobble.
Rugby. So been to Queensland. This was a rugby union game. They said, oh no, the control box is at the top of the stand there. So where's the lift? Oh, yeah, no, we don't have a lift. So we took over the men's change room. I think this was they were called the Reds, I think, I can't remember. So we took over their change rooms and used that for our kit.
Andrew, you can talk about the green.
Yep.
Yeah, you are.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's fascinating.
And I've got a slide coming up where I'm going to talk about that. So then that particular company went, flyaway kits are pretty intensive in terms of the labour to set it all up, do the gig, so rig and de-rig as we call it. So they built these little dinky vans. So this was my new spot, with the same equipment all shoved in a bunch of racks. The van's just wide enough for three racks wide. So there's the that's taken from the sliding door on the side of the van looking in. So I'm now sitting right next to the director, and you can see the screen here is where he does all the different camera angles and can cuts and the replays and things, and that's programmed there, and I'm still sitting in the corner here producing the audio mix.
So Andrew, it's the director who's actually doing that?
Yeah, in a smaller gig like that, the director is the switcher.
Yeah, okay.
As you move up the food chain, you have someone who's directing
Yep.
and someone who's switching.
Okay.
But for small stuff like this, directing and switching is the way that it's done.
It comes down to the difference between producing a clean feed, the happenings of the ground and the commentary that goes with it, versus the full package of all the replays, the fillers, the graphics, the music, all the bits and pieces to get laid on top of it.
Yeah.
When you do that in the van, that's when you need a director and a separate switcher.
Yeah, and for the smaller stuff that we've been doing, other than graphics, we've done everything else. So our clean feed doesn't have anything on the picture, but any replays we would do ourselves. So an RTD, so that when you see go from live to replay, there's often an image or something that spins around. We would graphic that inside the switcher. Replays, I would play some music underneath that. But in terms of all the content that you just talked about, Rod, like the graphics and the tickers that go across the bottom and the whatever TV station bug that might be on the screen, all done upstream and out of our. So that concept of clean and dirty, and in fact they have clean, dirty and filthy, I think is the other one they call.
Because that's got all the advertisements slapped over the top again.
Correct. So that's clean, dirty and filthy, yeah. Here's my commentary box. Commentary is pretty simple. We give them a couple of monitors so they can see scores and replays. Headsets plug into a little box. Microphone they can turn on and off, because when they don't turn it off and they put it down, we hear it's crunch, 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 so you get pretty frustrated with it. Sneaky button that allows them to talk to the director and cuts their microphone off air so they can have a conversation about something if they need to. And a knob so they can set their own ear or program, so what's coming, so they get to hear bat on ball as well. So my program feed's being fed to them. So commentary, we'd run a couple of roll of fibre up to them, and that particular commentary box is all IP connected. So Dante, just plug it in, away it goes. Side of the truck, little, you might call it a tailboard in any other language. This is a sideboard, so the bottom red things are our SEMPTI cameras coming in, up to 6 on this particular bus. A bunch of fibre, in through here. So that's how I get my Ethernet switch upstairs, and then just some analog I/O if you need it to get in, and a bunch of BNCs which are on the vision switch, so you can get SDI in and out depending on who might need it. And at the back of that little truck is my good friend Michael Leckie, sitting in the engineering position or broadcast engineer spot. And it's at this point that I was going to talk about the green. So he's got his hand on what looks like some joysticks there. I call him the green grass guy. So whenever you're watching sport, someone is looking after the iris and colour of every camera individually, so that when you switch between camera angles, it looks the same colour green in each camera angle.
And you've got to bear in mind that every camera's probably got about 10 or 20 different parameters that can be adjusted.
Correct. So iris is the one that's most important, because as the sun moves, you get more or less light in. So that joystick is his iris control. If you push the joystick down, it throws the camera up onto the blue screen. But you can see he's got 4 little screens there. Looks like he was doing 4 cameras. There's a hole in the deck there.
And I love that it's still manual. Somebody's doing it.
Well, iris control. I've done this stuff before. I used to hate doing iris control, but the cameras can't be, even though the cameras respond quickly enough to monitor the light levels. So it's got to be the manual.
Yeah, and typically in the big trucks, that we'll get some photos later, it's 4 cameras per person. So one CCU operator, camera control unit operator, can handle about 4 cameras. So you might have on a big show with maybe 20 cameras, you've got a whole bank of people sitting there, and all they're doing is making sure the grass is the same colour green.
Does that mean every time we have a day where the clouds are blowing through,
They hate it.
I was going to say, you've got either clear sky or overcast?
Yep.
You're literally riding the CCU as you're watching it, and the camera operator is sat there watching his iris go F4, F2, F4, F2.
Because the camera operator could do that, but typically with a camera, you've got focus and zoom control and following the ball. The camera operator doesn't have time to think about what his iris is looking like. So hence it's remoted to the guy sitting, in this case, in the back of the van. Down here are the camera, the control units. So there's a SEMPTI's the connection between the camera and that box, and a SEMPTI cable. It's a proprietary thing, a pair of fibres in it, and some copper in it. The copper powers the camera head up, and the fibre one each direction, so you get content from the camera, both. So it's an SDI feed, so both picture and embedded audio, which gets de-embedded on this unit here. So there's a couple of XLRs on the back of that come to my mixing console, and there's also a fibre going back the other way, so we can send program back to them. They've got a pair of headphones that they can talk to the director. That's just some more channels in the SDI. SDI's got up to 16 embedded audio channels in it, so you can use it for whatever you need, and they do.
We're talking kilometres of cable.
Potentially. At a cricket ground, we can probably get away with sort of a couple of 100 metres for the far end, but potentially, yeah. MCG, yeah. Bigger grounds, more paths they've got to get to wherever the camera is. Bellerive doesn't have very much installed SEMPTI, so you'll see at the beginning of the season they rock up with 500 metre drums of SEMPTI and run it all over the place and deal with it that way.
We used to go to Bellerive fairly frequently and would see the evidence of the footy teams from the mainland, the RB crews come in, because they would have left a dozen rolls of camera triacs there. Some of them are a kilometre long. They've got to go round all the safe ways to get to the camera location.
Correct. There's nothing.
And they leave it all coiled up there, figurated there.
Yep.
And we go and put our stuff in for the day and then take it out again. But their stuff there was there for the season.
And that's how they typically do it, yeah. And triac was the thing. It's SEMPTI these days, but you're right. And SEMPTI at least goes on rolls. Triac typically was figurated. SEMPTI's a little bit easier to deal with.
Andrew, if that guy is looking after 4 cameras,
yeah,
and he's making sure that the iris is the same, so or at least maybe different, but the green is the same, and then you've got 3 guys doing that. How do you know that they're all the same?
Sitting next to each other.
So they're looking at each other's?
So who sets up the reference screen in the first place?
So there's a scope there.
There's a guy they call the greenkeeper.
Yeah. That is very good. I like that. There's a vision scope there, so that they watch the vision scope, and that gives you a relative idea of what green is. So they've got an idea that there's a measurement that they can use for that, and that becomes their reference green, if you like. But as it gets darker, and like Bellerive's a classic, they call it the fly swatter. And I did the Women's National Cricket League final 2 or 3 weekends ago over at Bellerive, and it was a 10 a.m. start, and with the sun there, you've got this great big light tower, and you watch it move across the ground and then cover the pitch, and it just looks like a giant fly swatter because it's the head of the light and then the pole. And the CCU operators hate it because they're sure you're going to be able, it's not a perfect science, but it's a science enough to try and not have it such that, and the clouds come over so it all changes, and the sun comes back out again and it all changes. Night's much easier because it's typically, once it's dark, the lights are on and it's pretty much the same level.
Colour temperature of the sunlight changes during the day. It can go anywhere between 4,800 degrees Kelvin up to about 6,400, and later in the day all your shadows become longer. The temperature changes again in the shadow compared to the little bit of sunlight you get on the outside, and it's a constant job of going between those 4 screens. You see each picture in turn for about half a second before you've got to go back and check the first one again, because the camera's moving around the pitch looking at chasing footy, and it becomes a constant flash in your brain. That's high, that's low, that's different, that's wrong. The guy on the very end is looking at the station output or the van output, and he'll call to the CCU op that's looking after a group of cameras, your eye has gone off a bit.
Yeah.
bring your greens
Camera
up, bring
one's
your
hot.
blacks down, bring your blacks are starting to show a bit red and things like that, just as a visual monitor of the output, and it becomes a constant battle to try and get things matched, because the camera at this end of the ground has got a totally different rendition of what's happening from the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. Cricket's a bit easier. It's a pretty typical format. So, you know, someone comes in the bowl, camera 1 and camera 2 are watching. Camera 1's often a fixed shot on the pitch. Camera 2, ball follows and then follows it off. So the CCU operator knows the likely state of play, and he's listening to the director who is going 1, take 1, 2, take 2, 5, take 5. So he can also be thinking in his brain, oh, you're about to go to 5, I'm looking at 5 now, 5, yeah, 5's the right colour, green or... So they become good at it. It's a skill, it's an art.
There goes A over T when they decide to do the scenic shots that include the river.
Yeah, although...
Absolutely terrible on the big screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Artificial everything.
Yeah.
How do they go with handling those scenic shots out of the blue every now and then?
Well,
Yeah.
the best way to do it is to have a fixed camera. We call it a beauty shot. So it's set up, ready to go, and therefore the CCU can be adjusted, ready for it to. I'm going to take the beauty shot. The beauty shot's often used as a background for a scorecard. So yeah, mostly you don't put your ball follow cameras, which could be $50,000 for the camera components. Not forget optics.
Yeah.
You might have a little Marshall, $1,000 camera, which you can still adjust all those things on, but not the same level as you would do for your ball follow. This was I think it's called Seabus Stadium on the Gold Coast. So I went and did a rugby league. I think it was the Broncos and the Titans up there. So we'd by now graduated to a slightly larger broadcast truck, which had a few more bits and pieces in it. There's my little booth as the audio guy. There's the director lives in there. No, sorry, that was my mistake. That's the green grass guy. They're the CCUs. There's my broadcast engineer. My racks of gear with you can see the camera CCUs and various other bits and pieces in here. SDI crosspoint switches. There's a recorder in there. My live view units for streaming are up there. There's where my director sits. Sorry. No, this was cricket, but the same band. So there's the director. There's the guy vision switching. So there's your two people doing the
coffee.
very important.
The studio wouldn't run without coffee, believe me.
No. Comms is really, really important in this space. You've got to be able to talk to people and get them to do what you need them to do. So that's the comms panel sitting in my audio booth. So you can see there I've got access to Com 1, Com 2, Com 3, so I can talk directly to the commentators and ask them things in their ear. And overall comms for all of them. If I've got sideline reporters on an IFB, I can talk to them there. If I've got and in this gig I had a couple of audio assists, so they've got a radio on them, so I've got a means of being able to talk to them. The director, producer, director, they can all talk to me. There's the director there, and he'll say, replay package coming up, can you put some music underneath it? So comms becomes really, really, really important.
So do you have any sort of redundancy or is it, what sort of redundancy do you have in case these systems fail?
Yeah, look, it's a pretty good question. In terms of where we're physically seating, I'm in this truck, I'm in a different booth, but I just open the door and can talk to them. And I guess if I was out on the field, I'd be ringing my audio assistant and say, can you do this, can you do that? So I guess the redundancy is either talking to you directly or making use of something else. So no specific technology redundancies in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the audio booth again, and when you're in your own booth like that, it's really good to be able to see what's going on in terms of pictures, because just seeing program and putting an audio feed over program is pretty hard work. You've got to be able to see what's going on and see what camera angles and things are around. There's my director again. I was my broadcast engineer setting up something in the director's spot, and I still get to work with my son. So he's been camo for me a few times and audio assist. And then the Jack Jumpers decided that they were going to move to Tasmania. So all of a sudden, there's more sport that needs to be looked after. So this is, I don't know if any of you have been out to the My State Bank Arena in its new refurbished arrangements, but you can see they've certainly made it look like an American basketball stadium. Big jumbo screens up there for everyone to see. I sit down here, however, which can't see the court or the screens. Don't really like basketball, so it's probably a good thing that I can't see the court and the screens. Like cricket, don't like basketball much. But here, it's the RF management again. I've got a bunch of radio mics and some IFBs, and I'm effectively just managing to make sure that they are what they're working. I can see battery status on stuff. I can see signal level. I can see audio metering. Rod will be only too familiar with these shotgun mics in blimps. They do pick up the crowd quite well, particularly if these people are having some sort of things to say put directly underneath them. But nevertheless, it's about providing the whole sound field. So when you're at home, you get to hear it. We have a mic underneath each of the hoops so that you can hear the swish of the ball that goes through the hoop. And apparently they don't like being hit by a ball, as I found out
Can't think why.
on Monday when I was there and going, why isn't that mic? Ooh, that's the we get a bunch of different gear. So the same OB truck has been in the States since, I don't know, September last year, I think, and it went home to have a 4K refit. So they sent down a little thing that they use for racing. So a whole bunch of new gear turns up for us to learn. But what's really interesting is that we've now moved away from producing the content at the ground or at the court to it being done in a hub somewhere. So the truck out the side, out the back, is a giant interface converter. It takes a whole bunch of microphones and cameras in, and in the case of this, there's a 10 gig pipe that is there. It's part of the DPN network. So Telstra runs two networks, the DPN and the DVN. DVN is the content that you've produced, and it's got all the graphics and all the rest of it produced in the truck, and you send it out to DVN to be shipped around. The DPN is we're shipping the content directly to the hub, and they're making the decision on what camera angle they're going to use. The green grass is still fixed, and we do have a CC operator at the basketball because the lights are not completely even over the court, and so there's a bit of adjustment that needs to do, just little bits.
Having done the lighting out there for the previous arrangements, it is very difficult to get lighting even because the structure of the place is built in a rectangle.
Yeah.
Lighting is in full circle, and light falls away exponentially.
Yep.
And you can't get even field from a light across its whole aspect. It's hotter in the middle than it is at the side, and the colour temperature changes too.
Yep.
It's
been a real challenge. The new owners of My State Bank Arena have spent a lot of money, and the CC. I was only talking to the CC operator on Monday night. I said because we'd done some basketball at the Silverdome in Launceston, and it was really bad there. It was the corners of the court were dark. They were working. They had their work cut out for them. The new lighting they've got out there is actually pretty good, and they say it's very minor adjustments they need to do. They've done a great job of covering it, and because it's not moving, they're not changing the lighting all the time. It's the guy who owns the stadium is the guy that owns the NBL, so it's been lit for basketball. So they've done a good job of it.
So you say that it's all sent now via the two networks. Things like recording your camera output for later, is that now also done centrally? Or wow, okay, cool.
So every camera individually gets back to the hub.
Yeah.
And they then
Separate hard drive.
do all their replays and things out of the hub. So every camera is recorded, and the same with the audio director that you know I produce collect the audio for.
Yeah.
He's in the hub. I've never met him. I talk to him on the radio.
So yeah, I'm used to when you had broadcast vans, you'd have each camera would have a hard drive that would back up everything too, and same as microphones.
Yep.
But now it's all centralized. That's great.
Yeah.
So how far away is that hub? Where's the hub?
Melbourne.
There's Melbourne.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
So there's a pair of fibres coming into my State Bank Arena from different directions. So there's some physical redundancy, and all the content is just shipped
You
there.
send each individual mic feed back to the hub as well.
Yep. So this piece of kit here,
Just a split.
effectively, yeah. So again, because everything's IP now, and in the same way as I'm working in a theatre and I've got a stage box down under the stage that's coming back by a bit of blue cable, I just plug all my mics into that box there. So this is a bunch of radio mic receivers here. They all plug in there. I've got that little broken mic you saw underneath the hoop. 50 metres of cable to go out to the far one of those. They're all just plugged into the thing there and shipped on IP back to them, and you deal with it.
So do you transmit on, or do you put all your traffic through both routes at the same time? Or
Yes,
do
they
you have
do.
fallback system? Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
This concept of being able to send things back individually back to a hub is an extension of what happens with the Commonwealth and the Olympic Games, where you get each country now sending a team to the host city, and they'll sit in a booth and they'll have all the cameras and all the mics coming through from all the venues, and they each do their own selective mix, do it their way, the way they want, and it means that there's thousands of cameras and thousands of audio feeds all being matrixed everywhere, and each country does their own little thing with it.
Yep, and whoever the host broadcaster produces the content and hands it on to each of those stations that are bordered. So in Australia, typically Channel 7 does the Olympic Games. So they would, as Rod has said, collect the content from all different venues. And if it's something that they're not interested in, it goes on the floor, it doesn't get used.
At the other end of the fibre, I'm assuming that goes back to Eastfield Avenue.
Davey and Bathurst, yeah, that's right.
Of course, Bathurst now. And is that circuit switched, or is it IP at that
It's
level?
IP.
It's IP.
It's just an IP router.
Yeah.
So it's IP all the way to layer 3.
Yeah.
So it's not a layer 2 circuit back to Davey and Bathurst. It's layer 3 all the way.
And if they don't have a network, they stop the game.
Oh.
Apparently. Yeah, we may have had a game the day that Tasmania lost a couple of fibres on the 1st of March.
Nearly all of them.
Right into 2022.
And the most interesting thing, we did have content back and were able to do the game, but the most interesting thing was one of the things they rely on most is their stats package, which is cloud-based, which is done on the sideline live.
Doesn't that kind of scare you how we're relying on so much technology nowadays?
Sure. Who's got cash in their wallet?
Yeah.
Who's got more cash in their wallet now than they did before the 1st of March?
An arrangement with Basilic to use one of their fibres and vice versa.
We did.
See, the good eyes didn't work well, they did it.
No, yes, it did actually.
Yeah, it's not a big pipe.
No, it worked excellent. It really worked well. It worked to its capacity. But
The capacity's got a problem.
But no emergency services were affected. No critical services were affected. It was only the consumer services that were affected.
Just because you couldn't do Netflix, that wasn't important.
so again, this is where my interest in radio meets what I do. So I talk to my audio director, who's in the hub, on a portable radio. So I walk around the venue and I can talk to him anywhere. So here underneath the stand you'll see this box here. It's got 3 radio transmitters in it.
Looks like a repeater.
And it looks very much like a repeater because it is. And you'll see in the back of it there's some notch filters, there's a receive multi-coupler up the top there, and you'll see FM for floor manager, ATX for audio, and what's NBL for the NBL feed. So there are 3 different channels there. So it's duplex. I put my radio on ATX because I talk to my audio director, and this is transmitting at me all the time. So he doesn't key up the transmitter when he goes to talk to me because he's on one of those control panels you saw in the previous picture, and just pushes the button and talks to me. So I can be talking to him at the same time he's talking to me, albeit I don't hear him because I've still got a radio which is simplex.
Yeah, sorry, I can't hear you. What you said? What?
But good old UHF, nothing fancy here, but it was interesting because we got there the other day, and the comms, because there's a comms engineer that sets all this up, and my audio director's going, can't hear you, and sure enough I went and had a look at it, and this is not plumbed right, and then we put the receive antenna into the multi-coupler rather than into the transmitting chain as well, so made all the difference it turned out. Anyone have a guess as to what that is?
MTO? Multi-terminated fibre connection?
Yeah.
How many fibres?
How many fibres?
Audio?
You keen?
Jobs on the line.
No, it's not.
Good guy.
This is an audio thing, not a comms industry thing.
12. 16.
4.
No,
Oh. So we have a bunch of that all. That's exactly right. Yep. But I've got to say, in broadcast, the fibre is treated a lot more recklessly than we would do in the comms industry. Everybody carries a fibre cleaner with them in their pocket. Everybody, and it's used. Most times they go and use it. So, will you find a dust cap on the end of the fibre? Rarely.
I was wondering about that.
Rarely. Just clean it. Just clean it and plug it in. And they spend more time than it's worth chasing issues, which are typically a bit of dirt on a fibre, but it's the way they do it. So 12 core fibres, 3 of those on the end split out, and that I've got those plugged into my audio rack.
Single mode or multi-mode? Or?
Single mode, everything's single mode everywhere, so you can see there and there. Whoops, where's my mouse gone? There and there are my two fibres. So I've got 8 fibres coming into here that run all the infrastructure that's carrying, and we've got vision feeds coming away from this, and there's internet access for those NBL people that need to do their stats and stuff. All comes out of here.
Is it ruggedised fibre?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so the 12 cores would be the diameter of the cable that we're running is about that. I don't know whether you can't see it. No, you can't really see it on that photo. So I've done a bit of work for the big boys for NEP. That's the tailboard on the back of one of their trucks. And you'll see it's a combination of lots of B and Cs for SDIs in and out. These ones down here are those SEPTI connectors which we use for cameras. The fibre typically is over here somewhere. You'll even see some chrome up here, and there's always a monitor on the back here that you can typically switch to whatever you want to look at to do. And when you get inside, they're a bit more serious. This must have been a big bash game, I think, at Blundstone. So here's the example of this guy's not the director; he's just the switcher. Camera 1, take 1. Camera 2, take 2. He knows where his cameras are, and you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are stump cams kitting around there. I think helmet cams. Where were they? Helmet cams. I can't remember now. But all the different camera. They're the commentary box cameras. One of these says world feed up here, and the world feed is that clean feed that we typically put out, so it doesn't have anything on it.
Yep.
They normally will have an off-air monitor for the local TV station. I think that was.
I see two of the head cameras. Move your mouse to the right a little bit.
They are the right there.
Yep, go down.
Oh,
Yep,
there they are
down
there.
too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well done.
The graphics you got, are they being locally generated or are they coming from?
These graphics, yes, all locally generated. So these trucks carry everything with them. And there's a team of people. You know, there would be doing a big bash like game like this. It's probably 60 staff.
Yeah.
To pull off a game like that, you know, you've got probably 15 people just in cameras.
Yeah.
So it's not an insignificant investment. Audio land steps up a bit too.
Holy.
This is a
Who needs layers?
this is a console with 256 inputs. So it still does have layers.
That's a 32 feet?
Say that again.
32 feet?
Maybe I don't know. I overcounted them.
Decent number of layers.
I consider myself really fortunate to have got a gig on the Ashes game here. So I work. So that it's the most people I've ever seen at Blundstone in terms of broadcast. We had two large OB trucks, one for Fox Sports, who were the host broadcaster, one for Channel 7. BT Sport from the UK were out here doing their own in a van, much like the sort of stuff that we saw that I was showing earlier. So I was working for Fox, so we were the host broadcaster, so we had prime of everything.
Do you need a pilot's license to drive that mixer?
So the guy at the controls there, Wolfie, I reckon he's probably got more than a pilot's license. You know, I've used mixing consoles for 30 years. I'm glad I wasn't sitting in his seat.
Do you run a standardised layout?
He does.
Because you
Yes.
have to.
He toured this truck with the Ashes, so he knew exactly where everything was. So most of the time for him would have been in the prep of knowing exactly which fader does which. And there are a bunch of screens that he's got up here, but I don't know whether you can see. You might be able to see on the names on these screens: Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf Hotel India.
Masking tape on the front of that pitch?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Come on, that's a required
It's called broadcast tape.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
That's different.
It's about 10 times the price.
So these trucks have replay machines built into them. A company called EVS make them. So the ones in this truck will record 6 4K feeds.
Jeez.
And we were doing 5.1 surround, so we've stepped up the audio a bit here too. And you're looking about $1 million a machine, and there were 9 of them in the truck.
For the 5.1 surround, have you got someone else like looking at the spatial side of it as well, or is it all done by
All done by this guy.
Wow.
So he's understood what his sound field needs to look like, and therefore mixes to that. So there are 16 channels of audio on an SDI feed. So typically they've got it set up in a particular sort of way. So 1 and 2 might be the stereo program feed, 3 and 4 just effects.
Yeah.
You might have commentary on 5, and then you might do your surround channels. I can't remember exactly how he's done it. It's not.
No.
But that's the sort of concept.
On a nicer scale, at least it's all colour coded.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still want to be the one doing it.
But they've got a lot of old content on those replay machines. So while 9, not 6 9s are 54, we didn't have 54 cameras on the job, but there's a guy that knows his cricket well.
Knows his archives.
And knows his archives, and the commentary team will say, "Do you remember, Gilly, when you hit that ball over the fence and such?" And this guy will go, "Oh yeah, that was in this," and there's the replay.
Wow.
Who needs good?
Now,
That guy needs a pay rise.
just take note of that coin there, sitting on the console. You can see that it's I don't remember if it's a 5 or a 10 cent coin, but take note of that coin there.
That's a radio trick, that one, so you know which one to go next.
So this is stump mics. So yes, we do dig a hole in the pitch, and there are two, a primary and a backup. So just the same radio mics that I use in theatre, but we bury them in plastic bags, one there and one there, and you can see that's one antenna there. The other antenna must be about there somewhere. There's black boxes for the stump cam, two 4K cameras, one facing either way. At Bellerive, the blue and black coax there, they're cabled back all the way back to the truck. Cabled all the way back to the truck.
That's SDI.
Yep, all the way back to the truck. So there's if you were sitting in the burn stand looking at the pictures, on the right hand side there's a green box that you might put irrigation stuff in normally in your garden. If you lift that, there's a whole bunch of cable, Cat 5 and stuff that comes in through there. There's a 100mm conduit from there all the way back into the garage.
So the conduit's permanently in the ground, is it? So
Yep.
you can access it.
So to that box, and then when they decide which pitch they're going to use, and for international matches, there are 10 pitches at Blundstone, numbering again as you're looking from the burn stand, right to left. That's right. So as you're looking from the other left to right. Yep. So 1's on the right, 10's on the left. 4 and 5 are always used for international matches, and they cut the cable into the ground. They just spade.
Oh, so for every match,
So most matches wouldn't have that level of coverage, but for any match that they do that, yes, correct.
So where are the cameras located there?
Inside that stump.
Yeah, I suspected that. Yeah.
Did I have a photo of that? I don't know. I thought I had a photo of that.
What are the little bauble things?
So they are little microphones. So those little grey things.
The little whitish.
That thing there?
Yeah.
That's the microphone. That's the microphone transmitter there.
Yeah.
The actual microphone, we took an auger and drilled a little hole in the grass and put the microphone into that little hole and put that little fluffy thing over the top. So it's a windsock.
Oh, okay. Right.
So it's a windsock. They were white. They were made that grass colour by soaking them in a mixture of coffee and something or other else just to give them a colour. Camo.
Coffee camo.
And
Pure white for a television camera is a nightmare.
yeah.
Because it glows above anything else.
And you'll see that there's a little cover here, which is a little aluminium cover, which has got some grey stuff, sort of browny grey stuff on it that we slot cut in the grass and we just put it over. So the umpire is standing literally just behind that.
That's better.
So there you can see me looking down the pitch. And I've got to say, the weirdest feeling I had, we had to change the batteries in those mics at the beginning of each session of play. And I can remember after the first session of play, so in the long break walking out on the first day that I did that, thinking, when's security going to rugby tackle me? I shouldn't be out in the middle of the ground at an Ashes test. So I actually found that pretty cool. Spider Cam. Spider Cam's pretty cool. Spider Cam has two operators that run it. One that positions the camera on the four wires where it needs to go inside the ground, and the other guy's driving the camera bit to the point where it needs to go. And you can do interviews with the players with Spider Cam. So Spider Cam has a microphone, shotgun microphone, and a speaker in it.
Oh.
So Spider Cam would rock up, and in that case that was to Scott Boland clearly, and the commentary team from the commentary box we'd been talking to.
So how far away is this suspended from?
The light towers.
Really?
All four light towers. So there's a great big motor on the ground, unbelievably quickly. So basically feeding. So
it is pretty fast.
The control system knows to feed that, pull that one in while letting that one out, so it goes there. And if they're all taut, it's here, and they all let them off individually, will go down at the same place. So they've got some really clever control software that knows where that is. There's a guy with a joystick, just driving it. But so the guys in the comm box would then just have a conversation with the player. They had Foxy Rover out for the test as well. So again, 2 operators, one on the ground with his control driving the four-wheel drive remote control vehicle, and the other one up driving the camera and pointing the camera where they want. And the thing I loved about this was they used it for behind the batsman. They would run it between the sight screen and the rope as the bowler came into bowls, and they'd run it from left to right of the ground. So you're actually watching the bowler come into bowl at ground level, effectively. It was a shot that I'd never seen before.
Behind the bowler?
Behind the batsman.
Oh, behind the batsman.
It would have.
So you could see the bowler.
Yeah, so
otherwise the batsman
would have been pretty upset. That's right. So behind the batsman.
Yeah.
So you're taking a long shot from
So it's
behind.
batsman cam, sort of.
Yeah, correct.
Back cam.
We did a show on the ground before the game. So again, it's Radio Mike City. We had 30 channels of Radio Mike that we were looking after. They employed a spectrum engineer for the game, and he had 150 individual requests for different things for frequencies. So it was up to him. You could not use a channel unless it had been allocated by him. Radio Mike, IFB, Foxy Rover, didn't matter what it was. If you wanted it, and that included any electronic news gathering people who came on site. So, you know, the ABC were there. Sorry, you cannot use any RF unless it's been cleared with him. So that was a studio on ground. We had a small studio up in the stand, which was pretty cool. And I feel very fortunate to have watched most of the game from the commentary box. So I was sitting for quite a lot of the game there, and you'll notice who I was sitting next to at that point. It wasn't lost on me. It was Warnie, Michael Vaughan, former English captain, Adam Gilchrist, and Mike Hussey.
So, Andrew, if we just
Sure.
the camera that comes out off the towers.
Yes.
Spider cam.
Spider cam.
Spider cam. I couldn't think of his name. Yeah. So, is it RF or is it?
No.
It comes up through one of those comes up along the current.
One of those has got an SDI cable on it.
Okay.
What happens to it after the game? Because you've got 4 cables.
Yep.
Or you put in a road case.
So they lowered the camera down to a road case, they released the cables, and then they ran the cables back up over the top and back to their motors and took their motors away.
So just had big retractor.
So they remove it.
Yep.
It's not
No,
permanent.
they bring it round to each ground.
So the lead in from that question would be, how long would it take to set up for an event like this?
Well, I was employed for 7 days for the test match, so two rig days, and I was one of 4 in the audio team, on top of the audio guy, so the mixer guy. I didn't come back to the coin. I must come back to the coin this thing. And you know, there were, I don't know, cameras with operators probably 20. So we all descended on the place, bearing in mind that we were the last test, so they knew what they were doing. Well, we were local crew, I hadn't done any of the others, but I had no idea of what I needed to do. Can you go and do this? Yeah, sure, I'll go and do that. So about 2 days of rig. And there were more, as I said, 3 outside broadcast bands. There were 13 site huts. You know, the World Feed had a site hut. The Television Operations Centre had a site hut. It was, the place was teeming with people, as many as you can see. So there would have easily been 250 of us across the three broadcast groups to do a game. So your comment about plenty of people.
The other thing is that when you get on one of these gigs, they'll do a circuit, and it's all planned out, and it's headaches all round it if the venues change, because they do a circuit and map it all out. We're going to be in Melbourne this week, Sydney that week, Canberra the week after, then up to Brisbane, and then down to Adelaide. Oh, that's a bit of a nightmare, but anyway, give us 2 days travel, we'll get there. But they might do nothing but sport for 6 months.
Yeah, and then Perth didn't happen, so they all had to change plans. The DPN network got upgraded there to 50 gig, so because there were more than just Telstra, just one provider there, so 50 gigabits per second of content leaving the ground. We're nearly there. Coin. Thank you everyone in for the coin. Let's go back to the coin. So the microphones that we've got at either end of the ground, primary and a backup. The coin was to remind the guy, and it was the second guy, not this guy, the second guy, which end they were bowling from. So he turned the microphone up as each ball was bowled, and then turned it down again and the coin reminded him, was it that mic or that mic? And he simply moved the coin between. So they were the two backup mics there, and they were the two primes. He just moved the coin from there to there to there to there for the whole game. The most technically complex piece of equipment there.
You wouldn't want to forget to move the coin, would you?
No.
I have seen it arranged where they have all the mics laid out and brought down to sub-faders, and in bowling one direction you use this sub-fader, and it automatically brings up all the mics you want.
Yeah.
Go to the other sub-fader, and it'll bring up all the other mics you want, some of which might be in the first group,
Yeah.
but they're represented in two
Well,
sub-faders.
The only ones they changed were the microphones in the pitch.
Yeah.
Everything else they kept the same sound field irrespective of which end it was from.
Yeah, it varies between different sports on how you can do it.
And certainly when I do cricket, that's how I do it. I keep all my faders up. The biggest challenge I find in cricket, particularly with shotgun mics that you've got wound up to BBL that are on the edge of the ground so you can hear what's going on in the pitch, is that the ground announcer will go, and now coming in the bowl from the Church Street end, and your poor microphones that are wound up to BBL. Well, they go, ugh! Well, I use a ducker actually, Tricky. So I get a feed from the PA, and as soon as there's any audio on that channel, it pulls my effects mics down by typically 10 or 12 dB, which is enough just to, otherwise they on broadcast are over the top of the commentary team, and no one likes that. The commentary team like to be able to hear themselves, and like others to be able to hear themselves. The last few slides I had, we did Anzac Day last year, so Side Hut. Again, it's just another outside broadcast, it's just not sport this time. Commentary box in the Side Hut next to it, so we're just gearing up for the end of the month to do that one again. We had an election last year, so this was our flyaway kit in the back of the town hall for Sky News. So there was a debate between our very nearly former Premier and Rebecca White. Interesting challenge there, of course. So I don't know whether any of you have ever been into that room, but it
echoes like mad.
It echoes like mad. So for an audio engineer, that is a nightmare, particularly when I was responsible not just for the broadcast audio, but for the in-room audio as well.
Oh, that'd be bad.
So you've got a director saying to me, "That sounds so echoey on the program feed." I go, "Yep, sure." So you remove that, and then he's in the room. He goes, "No one can hear in the room." Yep, your call. Which one do you want? Yeah, okay, I see your point now.
It's a shocking room, isn't it?
Yeah. You really need to be able to do two separate mixes.
But even if you do that, the problem is it's still hearing, because what's coming out of the speakers is being picked up by the microphone that the guy's wearing for broadcast.
Yeah, so you get in another 1,000 people and pat it all down.
And during COVID, as you can see how they were all spaced,
Yeah, you can't do it.
not a chance. And then election night. So this was our flyaway kit on election night in the tally room and the little studio. So I was working for Southern Cross that night, and there was the team that we did.
ABC used to call it OB in a suitcase.
OB in a suitcase, yeah. It was not quite in a suitcase.
Yeah, so there were about 10 boxes.
It's a very big suitcase.
Big suitcase. And the very last few slides that I had, I feel privileged to have learnt a lot over the last 6 years about TV and broadcast. And I guess it's always nice to be able to apply that learning to something else that you might be involved with. And my grandmother was at the laying of the foundation stone at the church up in North Hobart, opposite the State Cinema. And it's the place that my family have attended for certainly all of their lives. So when COVID happened, and back at the beginning of 2019, what do? You build a studio in the church. Brought in a bunch of lights. I knew nothing about what I was doing. I just made it up as I went. So I've got a bunch of cameras. You can see a tiny little handy cam sitting here. There's a DSLR here, another camera over there. I think there's a GoPro sitting over there somewhere. And I can remember the first Sunday that Jeff, the minister, said, I'd like to record something that we can put out for Sunday. And I went, sure. So we went down Saturday afternoon, recorded a few camera angles, and then about 5 AM Sunday morning I went, yeah, I think I'm done. And I went, yeah, this is not sustainable, is it? So we went from Saturday afternoon to Thursday night to record. And I learned a lot about post-production and taking multiple camera angles that are all recorded on individual SD cards and stitching them all together so it looks like a cohesive presentation. So I was doing that basically from March all the way through till about August. And you can see we had others come in and do what they needed to do, and then they would nick off, and it was very much the non-linear editing arrangement. I've got all these bits, glue them all together. A separate audio recorder, so I've got a decent Zoom recorder, microphone on their ear, so that I was once told that TV without sound is a magazine.
Yeah.
And Rod will attest to the fact that people will cope better with poor picture than they will with poor audio. They'll turn off quicker if the audio sounds crap. They'll give up. So in my mind, audio was king. And then come August last year, year before last, we said, we want to get people back in there. So a matter of understanding how do I put together something that I can do on a shoestring, because I'm not a broadcast company and don't have an endless OB budget. And it turns out that other companies, the companies that make stuff at the low end, were going, yeah, I think there's a market for people trying to do this sort of stuff. So that's the setup in there now, with some what we call hot hats or pan tilt zoom cameras, 8-channel vision switch, green screen graphics engine, and a stream deck to recall a bunch of preset locations for the cameras, and goes out on YouTube every Sunday.
Nice.
And then Christmas Day, I was in Devonport because my family live in Devonport. My wife's family live in Devonport. So, yep, I did the service from sitting on the kitchen table, being able to watch what was going on and switch it and do everything. Because you just do it over IP and you can.
Yep.
So there's the hub.
Yeah.
Just like we're doing with sports broadcasting.
Sort of.
Sort of.
How do you fit in time to work for Telstra?
That's a good question.
That was what I was going to ask her.
Well, I guess during our COVID experience, everyone was at home, so I had all this time that I wasn't doing anything else. So my time to learn and research and work out how this stuff works, I had that time.
Right.
My theatre exploits, because I'm doing stuff with my kids, I found that an easy thing to time slice into my life. And sports broadcasting, it's not as if I'm doing it every day.
So you take leave.
You take leave, or it's often on the weekend.
Yeah.
Particularly with the footy, it's usually a Friday night or a Saturday over there. The cricket, there'll be an odd day here and there. You know, I did basketball on Monday night, just gone. I left the office at 3 o'clock, but I started at 7 AM, so I'd done the 7 hours. No one cares.
Who pays for all this? How do you get paid?
How do I get paid?
Yeah, well, who puts all this stuff into these? Who's getting the money out of it?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of sports broadcasting, I guess ultimately the TV stations pay for the content.
And all these people that turn up.
So none of the TV stations own their own outside broadcast function. And that's, even the ABC have sold off their outside broadcast function of trucks and things. So they will go to one of the outside broadcast companies, whether that be Gravity Media, whether it be NEP, and they'll say, I need you to do a women's Big Bash game, and they'll go, okay, and I have no idea what it costs because I'm not in that space, but it might be here, it's going to cost you 20 grand. I go, sure. So we'll add that to the cost of it. us buying the rights to do that, and we'll sell advertising and recover it that way. I can imagine the TV right to the Ashes would have been a reasonable number. I've no idea what it was, but a reasonable number.
Yep.
Probably a matter of the public record somewhere. And they paid NEP to come in and produce that content. So the money that I got paid, because I'm just on staff.
You just put your bill in for the hours you did.
Well, I'm on staff. Yeah, so the way that they work with freelancers is they employ you and someone paid.
Who's NPG?
NEP.
Who are they?
They are the biggest outside broadcast company in the world.
Oh, right.
Stands for Northeast Productions. I was in the US in 2019, and I was catching a bus from New York back to Washington DC, and the bus stop was outside Madison Square Garden, and we were waiting for the bus to turn up, and I turned around and there's a case coming out of the front door of Madison Square Garden with NEP's logo on it. So they're everywhere. And they're certainly in Australia. They're certainly they have most of the business. So they do all the cricket, all the footy. Gravity Media, who were some of the smaller stuff you saw tonight, they do some of the minor sport stuff. So I think they do the car racing, and shared around.
Warren's been watching from Casey.
Has he? Hello, Warren.
And he's asked, how does the logistics work for AJ gear at the big events?
It's for AJ gear.
I think it might be your gear.
So I would typically not use any of my gear at any of those big things.
Right.
It's all provided by the broadcast company. My theatre work, sure. I have a bunch of radio mics and a bunch of other mics for the orchestra, mixing consoles, etc. And I pile them in the back of my ute and take them along.
Supplementary question from Warren.
Sure.
How much can or does he have to carry? Or is it all set up? Like when in the setup?
Oh, so no, we would do a rig and a D-rig.
Okay.
But everything's on wheels.
Okay. In road coasters?
Yeah, I would. The heaviest thing I'd lift would be a microphone, probably.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Don't strain yourself carrying that microphone.
No, one has to be careful. Certainly with any of the large sports stuff, yeah, we're typically not carrying heavy boxes. Having said that, Blundstone Arena doesn't have a lift all the way to the camera deck, so the radio mic receivers took 4 of us to get it up the stairwell. But typically we're not carrying a lot of heavy stuff, no.
Okay, cool.
Anything else, Warren?
Ask Warren, why is he watching this and not working?
What time is it there?
What is it now?
10 past 9.
It's 11 minutes past 9.
It's about, actually no, I've got it on my phone, hang on, because I put it in there because I thought it would be, it's 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
12 past 10.
Past your bedtime.
So that's why he's not working.
It's only an hour. It's only an hour more than what we are.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
Still
it's straight down. And he just said thanks. Cool.
No worries, Warren.
So there you go.
Any other questions?
So, when you say, like with the basketball at the deck,
Yep.
when you say that goes to a hub, does that audio and video individually goes to whoever has the rights for broadcasting, or is all the mixing done at that so-called
All done at the hub.
Okay.
So the hub. So the staff in the hub are an extended part of the team of the outside broadcast company. So it's NEP's hub, and they produce the content and then send that to the whoever's bought the content.
Okay.
So I think is it ESPN? Who watches the basketball here? I think it's ESPN that broadcasts the basketball. I don't like basketball.
So they just have one hub for the whole of Australia?
I think there might be one in Sydney, but the only one I've dealt with is in Melbourne.
Is the hub the same as the playout centre, or is it something totally different?
I don't even know what the playout centre is. That's
No, it would be because the hub in this case is a contribution centre, whereas a playout centre is
It's a distribution.
Yeah,
it's where they take the tapes.
The playout centre would be the individual television stations. Yes.
Okay.
So does any companies like that exclusively use fibre, or do they use satellite links as well?
So we did 2 basketball matches in Launceston this season, and Launceston doesn't have fibre into it, so a little satellite truck turned up. And in that instance, we also did the content on site. So we had an audio director, we had a TV director in the truck. So the truck is capable of doing that, but when it's used here in Hobart, it's a giant interface converter.
If you set up a facility like that, might cost you a couple of million, but you've got the ability to handle multiple games all at the same time, but it also saves on the transport and accommodation of a whole stack of people. They don't have to move around the country, and they can do a job today and another job tomorrow instead of being on the plane.
Well, in fact, basketball on a weekend, you often have a 1 o'clock game, a 3 o'clock game, and a 4 o'clock game, and a 7 o'clock game, or whatever it is. So the one team in the hub can do all 3.
It would also save wear and tear on the equipment. It's all stationary in the same place,
Yep.
in an aircon room, as opposed to banging around a truck.
Yep.
You said Launceston doesn't have fibre.
Into the Silver Dome.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, yes, that. Good qualification. Yeah. Yes.
They have string.
They have string. There's no fibre into the Silver Dome.
All right.
State government facility.
Yeah.
And string.
Wet string, get it right.
Come on.
Never comes to government.
If you make it wet, you get a better string.
Cool. Any final questions for Andrew?
No, it's not regular facility, it's a string.
All right, can we show our appreciation, please?